Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the stage and welcome Mr. Ali Robinson, accompanied by Mark Lowry.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll come and join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing life today. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll come and join us. Oh, yes. And this world will live as one. Oh, yes. And this world will live as one. Oh, and the world will live as one.
Please welcome JCRB AJC Chairman of the Board, Dr. David T. Rudman.
Good evening, and welcome to the 38th Annual Jewish Community Relations Bureau American Jewish Committee Human Relations Dinner. What a fantastic performance that was by Ali Robinson. Thank you for being with us this evening, Ali. And thank you all for being here tonight and supporting the work of the JCRB AJC. It is a privilege to stand before you representing this agency. For nearly 70 years, the Jewish Community Relations Bureau, American Jewish Committee, has been an advocate for justice, protecting and preserving equal rights for all members of our greater Kansas City community. We do this by building bridges of understanding and nurturing of the guiding principles that all people of goodwill embrace, working to prevent discrimination, reduce prejudice, and strengthen democracy and expand freedom. Under the skillful leadership of JCRB AJC's Executive Director, Marvin Schneller, we continue to advocate and educate to eliminate injustice and discrimination at home and abroad. Tonight, we are most honored to present the Henry W. Block Human Relations Award to James B. Nutter, Sr. Tonight's dinner chairs, Anita Gorman, Phil Kirk, Christy Wyatt, and David Westbrook will tell us, in the life of our honoree, Jim Nutter, the goals and efforts of the JCRB AJC are also those Jim has put into practice throughout his life. Anita, we would like to begin with you.
Thank you, Dr. Rudman. The dinner chairman and I are honored this evening to talk about our good friend Jim Nutter, who is most definitely a valued Kansas Citian. We believe in so many ways the life Jim has led and created here in our city seamlessly aligns with JCRB AJC's core efforts such as honor, community dignity, standing together, and equality. Within each word, a story can be told, one that illustrates why Jim is this year's Henry W. Block Human Relations Award recipient. And the first of these stories begins with honor. I'm pleased to be able to talk about honor and Jim Nutter Sr. It's not always easy to find honor everywhere, particularly in politics. But in Jim Nutter Sr.'s case, he shines with honor in politics. I could tell you many stories of many elections, but the one that I think you might find most interesting occurred in 1979, a pivotal year for Kansas City. Jim decided to get in the race to back a candidate that was well-to-do, Harvard-educated, successful businessman, a Republican, and from the Jewish community. Now, whatever you want to think about all those characteristics, that is not a typical candidate that runs for citywide office in Kansas City. Jim Nutter, the Democrat, threw his honor behind that candidate. As his co-chairman of that campaign, I recognized that Jim would not accept money that had strings attached. He made very sure that bills were paid promptly. And on election night, Richard Berkeley won that election. And began 12 years of service to a community that led it forward in many very valuable ways. I could go on and on about a number of elections, but I know you'll want to hear from my fellow co-chairman, Phil Kirk, and he's going to talk to you about community dignity.
Thank you, Anita. My first observations of Jim Nutter occurred about 50 years ago in the early 1960s. I was fresh out of Northwestern Law School coming back to Kansas City. I'd heard the wonderful Senator Everett Dirksen tell us in law school that he was going to throw his support behind the civil rights laws not because any political party wanted it, but because he was getting close to when he might meet his maker and he wanted to do the right thing. I arrived in Kansas City, and my father, a very dear and long-term friend of Jim Nutter, said to me, "Son, I've always told you the family motto, you have to make deposits before you make withdrawals. So if you're going to be in this community for any time at all, there's about 4 people that I want you to emulate for sure. One of them was this fine lady here, one was Bill Dunn Sr., one was Bill Doremus, and of course, one of them was Jim Nutter." The alarming thing about Jim Nutter's name being mentioned in that conversation because he's a Democrat, and my father was so avid a Republican that I knew if I was supposed to listen to a Democrat, he must be a special Democrat. Indeed, he was. In fact, as I began my career and started looking around the community, about that same time, Bobby Kennedy said, sometimes a great man and a good man starts a small ripple that then becomes a stream, that then becomes a river. Well, Jim Nutter's brush is too big and his palette too full of too many colors to start a ripple. I soon learned that Jim Nutter's was a cascade of concern and commitment. Some examples. But for Jim Nutter, I don't believe in all honesty in politics, we would ever had the wonderful, fine leadership of a mayor like Mayor Cleaver or now Sly James if Jim Nutter hadn't had the courage to go precinct by precinct, making sure that in the elections, like all of life for Jim, it needed to be a fair game. Jim doesn't play any game that isn't equal and fair. Next, and but for Jim Nutter, we wouldn't have some of the wonderful parks and green space and City of Fountains, except his combination with this wonderful woman. And so you can go around our city, and when you see some of the green, beautiful boulevards, take your hat off to these two wonderful people. Likewise, we wouldn't have had the rejuvenation of some of our troubled neighborhoods and some of our boulevards that had fallen into disrepair. And Jim Nutter on his own went into neighborhoods, neighbor after neighborhood, insisting on fair housing and restoring housing and reclaiming Paseo. All of these things Jim Nutter did quietly and without asking for any recognition or credit. And then finally, while all these wonderful things were going on, and after he'd finished upgrading and lifting up Ivanhoe neighborhood and all of his associates that helped, at the same time, at 41st and Broadway, he and his son Jim and his constant friend and advisor Frank Seabury were building one of our most successful business enterprises. But it was a business with more than a financial balance sheet. It's a business with a community service and citizenship balance sheet, a magnificent example of enlightened capitalism. In that same period, I saw what I call Splendor on Broadway, and that is not a Broadway musical, it's Nutterville. One by one, and that's what I call this place. It's my Camelot, my Sistine Chapel of urban responsibility and renewal. One by one, flower by flower, garden by garden, house by house, Jim Nutter restored, upgraded, and made beautiful everything around his business. I looked at that and said, I wonder if we could copy a little of that downtown and around our library. And I got those ideas of beauty landscaping from Nutterville. Then, and finally, I saw through all of this a wonderful core of moral accountability, a thread that said human dignity and decency is job one. And so now, my words are really not adequate to talk about Jim Nutter. I'll give you some of his own words that I heard recently at another award ceremony. Jim said, "You're giving an award to a failure. I have observed for 10 years, 3 decades, 10 years after 10 years after 10 years, the sad treatment of the working poor's children and the children of our minorities. And we have to save them to save ourselves." Now that is the cleanest, brightest spotlight into the soul and heart of this great man that I can give you. At the end of all this and in conclusion, I thought I ought to check back in with my dad and say, hey, Dad, I think I've been listening, and you were right. This is really a special guy. I said, now that you're up there in heaven and you get some spiritual input, who would you nominate? Who's the profile new player that we should modify here or emulate when we want to find out how to be decent to each other? He said, son, don't make me repeat myself. It was Jim Nutter then, it's Jim Nutter now, and it's Jim Nutter tomorrow. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Phil. I'm Christy Wyatt, and I want to thank you all for coming out on this cold night for such a wonderful cause and to celebrate all the great works of our friend Jim Nutter. Standing with others. Standing with others for a common cause. Jim knows how to bring people together, and he champions efforts he believes in. In the 50s and 60s, James B. Nutter and Company was the first Kansas City mortgage company to make home loans in Black neighborhoods and to single women. Jim worked tirelessly on human rights issues he cared about, such as the public accommodation law in 1964, when he canvassed, went door to door in his Ward Parkway neighborhood, and worked very hard through the years in the 70s on the Equal Rights Amendment. He led the successful campaign for a new Jackson County jail to replace the old derelict structure. He led the effort to repeal Kansas City's blue laws, and he got rid of those pesky yearly city stickers that we all dreaded going to get. In 1997, he lit up Kansas City literally with his belief that additional streetlights would make Kansas City safer and would help revitalize our neighborhoods. The result is pretty impressive. 40,000 replaced streetlights and 30,000 newly installed. Through the years, he stood together with many candidates who sought his help and guidance, and who went on to shape our community. Leaders such as Dick Berkeley, the city's first Jewish mayor, Emmanuel Cleaver, the city's first African-American mayor, Senator Claire McCaskill, United States Senator Claire McCaskill, and many, many others. And he continues to stand with others today to advance some of his favorite causes. His beloved University of Missouri and his 10-1 Tigers. The Truman Presidential Library, neighborhood transformations that Phil has talked about in the Ivanhoe neighborhood, and of course his charming business district around 43rd and Broadway, affectionately known as Nutterville. Along with Annabelle, his wife of 59 years, he's been a great friend to Wayside Waste, Children's Mercy Hospital, and many other wonderful institutions. And of course, his greatest cause of all, improving the prosperity and livability of the place he calls home, Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm David Westbrook, and I'm honored to be seated by these co-chairs of mine. I was told tonight that I would get the privilege of playing cleanup. There's nothing to clean up. I think it's all been said. Equality of opportunity is something that this nation was founded on. In 200 or some years ago, when Jefferson and the other founders said liberty and equality of opportunity will be our overarching values, they put into play an extraordinary experiment, the United States of America. But equality of opportunity at the time of our nation's founding included slavery, which was still legal. Women couldn't vote. Children were virtually not heard at all. So we had to learn that for these values to advance, they must be treated as aspirational. And it would take people like Jim Nutter Sr., who would adopt new and progressive ways of engaging in civic leadership to advance some of those values. I think he did it really effectively in the home mortgage industry. FHA loans were not popular with real estate agents in the past. They were burdensome. It was hard to get the loans approved. It took a lot of time. They were first-time homeowners and weren't going to buy a necessarily expensive home. Through developing software that facilitated the processing of an FHA loan in one day, that unpopular source became extraordinarily popular with real estate agents. And agents and their customers across the country were given access to the American dream, a home loan. He did the same kind of pioneering with reverse mortgages, complicated and heavily regulated. The reverse mortgage market was fundamentally stimulated by that little mortgage company here in the city, James B. Nutter, in all the states, virtually all the states. So people would have an opportunity to retire in their home while benefiting from the asset value of that home, not having it all tied up in the real estate mortgage. These are equality of opportunity values that are being advanced in business that created tremendous chances for people to have experiences of our democracy that they might otherwise have been denied. And he did it, and guess what? It was remarkably successful. And what did he do with that success? He became one of our community's leading philanthropists. So the wealth that's created is stimulated by equality of opportunity, and the wealth that comes back into the community through the generosity of gifts, some of which I suspect we will never know about, but they are numinal. We feel them today. So it's an honor for all of us to be here, an honor to respect and reward a man with well-deserved recognition for his life of achievements. And I consider him our city's very best friend. Congratulations, Jim.
Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the leading Jewish theologians of the 20th century, who marched arm in arm with Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama, said racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum hatred for a minimum reason. Tonight, we are fortunate to hear from civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis, who has fought racism his entire life. He was an architect of and a keynote speaker at the historic March on Washington, D.C. in August of 1963, and has continued to fight for civil rights throughout his illustrious career. Unfortunately, bigotry is not just a problem of the past. As many of you know, a few weeks ago, the neo-Nazis, the National Socialist movement, came to town. There was much debate on how to respond. Some thought we should ignore them. Some thought we should protest them at the courthouse steps. But in the end, we chose to assemble in peace to stand up against bigotry. 10 organizations representing different races, religions, and ethnicities came together to fight against racism, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism. It was an amazing experience to see so many diverse people come together for a common cause. It is the essence of the JCRB-AJC to build bridges and coalitions. No one should stand alone against injustice. We must continue to fight injustice in the future. Your help and support for the JCRB-AJC allows our organization to continue our important work to fight injustice at home and abroad. We greatly appreciate all of you for being here tonight. At this time, I would like to bring your attention to some of our individuals and companies whose support is essential for our cause. First and foremost, we thank our bridge builder, tonight's honoree, James B. Nutter Sr., whose generosity will allow us to continue to do the work of our organization. To our platinum patrons, Marion and Henry Block Family Foundation, James B. Nutter and Company, your support to the JCRB-AJC and our community is extraordinary. To our Ruby patron, James B. Nutter Jr., we are deeply grateful for your many kindnesses. And to our diamond patrons, Bert Berkeley, the Soslin Foundation, Sprint, Burns and McDonnell, John and Trudy Jacobson with Trans Am Trucking, Shook, Hardy and Bacon LLP, Cook Family and Kirk Foundation, Children's Mercy. You are allowing us to continue our advocacy for justice. Our most sincere appreciation to you all. Thank you. The Henry W. Block Human Relations Award, named after the prince of a man who bears his name, states justice, justice thou shalt pursue, is fitting for our honoree. Through his actions, he has made fair housing available to so many and continues to work to strengthen the urban core. He has been a force for good in our city and in our nation. His good works and philanthropy has helped to make this world a better place. At this time, I'd like to mention the many dignitaries who are with us here tonight. Please stand as I call your name, and we ask you to hold your applause until the end. United States Congressman John Lewis. United States Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II. U.S. District Judge Howard F. Sachs. Judge Sachs is also a past president of both the JCRB and the AJC before our merger. Missouri Supreme Court Justice Richard B. Titleman. Kansas State Representative Melissa Rooker. Missouri State Senator Shalon Kiki Curls. Mayor of Leawood Peggy Dunn. Former Kansas City Mayor Richard Berkeley. Jackson County Executive Mike Sanders. Jackson County Prosecutor Jean Peters Baker. Kansas City Councilman Jim Glover. Kansas City Councilman John Sharp. Jackson County Sheriff Mike Sharp. Overland Park Police Chief John Douglas. Director of the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and Museum, Dr. Michael Devine, and the 500 of you distinguished guests here tonight to celebrate Jim Nutter Sr. and the JCRB AJC. I am honored to introduce Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II, who was instrumental in securing Congressman John Lewis as our keynote speaker. Congressman, we cannot thank you enough. You have always been a friend to the JCRB AJC and to the Kansas City community. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Cleaver to the podium to deliver our invocation.
For those of you who have already begun to eat, the rest of us pity you, and we hope that your parents can find out about the disrespect you have displayed in public. And now to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you for this opportunity to honor this good and decent man, Jim Nutter. We thank you for bringing together a diverse group of individuals who love justice and who display mercy. And we ask that as we partake of this food, that it will provide us nourishment that will allow us to even stand stronger for that which is good and right in your eyes. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome from the Jewish Community Relations Bureau, American Jewish Committee, Executive Director Marvin Schneller.
Thank you, Donna. I'd like to begin with a couple quick, sincere thank yous. To the Sheraton Kansas City at Crown Center's Katie Allen, who's Director of Catering and Event Management for both Crown Center Starwood hotels. Katie helps us in so many ways to make our annual hotel experience so wonderful. Donna Thomason, whose voice you just heard, is President and Creative Director of Epic Events / a Starlight Theater Company, who produces this event for us and makes it run like a Broadway show. And Carol Burton, JCRB-AJC's Director of Administrative Services, who is responsible for so many aspects of this event and makes sure nothing falls through the cracks. At our place, she's our own Radar O'Reilly of MASH. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. As many of you may recall, in 2011, JCRB-AJC and the Kansas City Globe newspaper organized a Black Jewish civil rights trip to the South, visiting Montgomery, Selma, Birmingham, and Atlanta. It was a powerful journey. We saw so much. The image seared in my mind of the statues of German Shepherd dogs ripping at the flesh of African Americans is a painful reminder of dogs doing the same thing to members of my family in Eastern Europe 70 years ago. At our stop in Selma, Alabama, we discussed the events of March 7th, 1965, when 600 peaceful, orderly men, women, and children protesting for the right to vote started across the bridge and were attacked by Alabama state troopers in a brutal confrontation that became known as Bloody Sunday. When photographs and news broadcasts of that senseless cruelty appeared, it helped hasten the passage of the Voting Rights Act. Our group knew that day that the leader of the march was a young and respected John Lewis. What we didn't know is that 2.5 years later, we would have the great honor to meet him here in Kansas City. As we walked together over that bridge 2 years ago, symbolic though it was, we felt the change that had taken place, a change paid for by the blood and tears of the brave people who were degraded and bloodied on that spot, including the blood and bruises of our guest tonight, the Honorable John Lewis. Positive change was also aided by the examples of many people here tonight. As you know, my position is named after Bert Berkeley, who not only broke down barriers here in our community, but traveled around the country to inspire others to do so. Bert, I am grateful for your inspiration, and all of us here are grateful for your continued diligent work to ensure that the purpose of this dinner is a reminder to do justice year after year. Ladies and gentlemen, our dinner always honors Henry W. Block, too. Henry, your grace, your kindness, and your pursuit of justice make it a privilege to know you. You understand our roots and our mission, and it is a singular honor for JCRB-AJC to be the home of the Henry W. Block Human Relations Award. This has been another meaningful year for the work of JCRB-AJC. Please accept our gratitude for your support and for being a partner in our work. In addition to our continuing community relations and conflict resolution, much of which is done behind the scenes, we again hosted a wonderful iftar dinner at our building, breaking the Ramadan fast with our Muslim friends. We hosted the Israel ambassador to the United States with a huge crowd and many elected officials. And just this month, as Dr. David Rudman mentioned, we participated in a response to the National Socialist movement, reminding them Nazis and their hate are not welcome in our city. We also reminded them it's not only new immigrants who care about the justice of comprehensive immigration reform. We do too. This dinner is our only fundraiser of the year, but more than that, it serves to be our justice raiser. We hope everyone walks out of here tonight inspired to do exactly that, justice. You don't have to be the founder of a major tax preparation firm or a major real estate company. Matter of fact, you don't need to have a job to do justice. Friends, what we need is to not sit idly by, but rather to speak up when we see injustice, even if no one is watching. All of the months of planning, the mailings, the phone calls, and so much more were to achieve the goal of honoring James B. Nutter Sr. tonight. Mr. Nutter has exhibited compassion, understanding, strength, and forthrightness as he lived his life by the principles of justice and fairness. It has been a great pleasure and an inspiration to learn more about Jim. Those of you here tonight and many of Jim's friends and admirers who were unable to attend, grant him the honor he so well deserves. It is with deep sadness that we mark two wonderful women who passed away since our last dinner. They were great friends to JCRB-AJC, and we recall their kindness and beauty. Marion Block, Henry's wife, and herself a past honoree before the award was renamed for her beloved Henry. Marion was Henry's partner in the family tradition of civic involvement and generosity. And Adele Hall, the first recipient of the renamed Henry W. Block Award. Adele was our most active past honoree, willing to use her time to assist us, and while doing so, inspire us in so many ways. The passing of these two treasures has been a great loss to many. To Henry and the Block family, and Don and the Hall family, please accept our sincere condolences. Our special thanks goes to Congressman Cleaver. Dayenu, the Hebrew word for "it would have been sufficient," is a traditional song during the Passover Seder commemoration and has many verses thanking the Almighty for all that was done as the Jewish people went from slavery to freedom. For example, had you freed us from slavery and not given us the Sabbath, Dayenu, it would have been sufficient. Had you given us manna from heaven and not given us the Torah, Dayenu, it would have been sufficient. There are many verses to that song reminding us that so much was done for us. Here we are with our speaker, John Lewis, here to honor our honoree, Jim Nutter, and make it an even more historic event as our guest speaker. Knowing all the things and all the effort Reverend Cleaver made over time, and all he has done to make tonight a reality, it's time for me to sing Dayenu to Reverend Cleaver. Okay, let me spare you the off-key rendition and say to Congressman Cleaver, thank you. Okay. And we have for every person here a copy of John Lewis's book, Walking with the Wind, a memoir of the movement. Please pick up your copy on your way out of the ballroom. And to each of you here tonight, thank you for making this a great evening for Jim Nutter Sr., for Henry Block, JCRB-AJC, our community, and the cause of justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, please look to the screens as we learn more about tonight's keynote speaker, Congressman John Lewis.
I grew up outside of Troy, Alabama, about 50 miles from Montgomery. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. My father had saved $300, and with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. We grew up very poor. I had 6 brothers, 3 sisters, wonderful mother, wonderful father. They worked very hard.
John Lewis grew up on that farm, a farm where everyone had to work. Work was survival, a necessity. But that Alabama farm boy wanted more. He was driven to get an education.
Now we are reaching out for the daybreak of freedom and justice and equality.
Then he heard about a young preacher from Montgomery, heard him on the radio, read about him in the newspaper. The light that glowed from the old Lewis radio was a beacon. The voice behind the static was a new young preacher that burned with change. It seems Reverend King didn't see why a black person had to sit in the back of a bus or drink from a colored-only water fountain. So 18-year-old John Lewis boarded a Greyhound bus, a bus ride that helped change America.
I saw Martin Luther King Jr. standing behind the desk. I was so scared, so frightened. I didn't know what I was going to say to Martin Luther King Jr. This man had emerged as my hero, my leader, someone that I admired. And I was really scared to be in his presence. So he spoke up and said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" Then I responded by saying, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." I gave my whole name. I didn't want there to be any mistake that I was the right person. And that was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of my involvement in the Civil Rights Movement. And we'd be sitting there at a lunch counter, orderly, not saying a word, and someone would come up and put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs, pull us off the lunch counter stool, start beating us, and then we would be charged with disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, and we were being very orderly, very peaceful.
But African Americans soon could use the lunch counter, and the movie houses were integrated. And again, John Lewis paid a price. 40 times he was jailed, and 40 times he emerged from jail to continue the fight for freedom. Out of blood, out of death, out of great courage, freedom happened. Rule of law happened. The bus stations were desegregated. The struggle shaped up in new places. There was one more bridge to cross before legislation was demanded, and that bridge was in Selma, Alabama. This sleepy southern bastion of segregation would become the gate through which freedom would march, if freedom could get through the dogs and clubs and horses and blue shirts. The freedom marchers needed a man of courage. They turned to John Lewis to lead them on what became shamefully known as Bloody Sunday.
We came to the apex of the bridge, and down below we saw a sea of blue. Alabama state troopers. We continued to walk, and we come to that point within hearing distance of the state troopers. And a man identified himself and said, "I am Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march and will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse and return to your church." In less than a minute and a half, Major Cloud said, Troopers advanced. And you saw these men putting on their gas masks. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bullwhips, trampling us with horses, releasing their tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick and had a concussion at the bridge. That day, I felt like it was the last protest. I felt like I was going to die. I thought I saw death. But Bloody Sunday was a turning point in the history of the civil rights movement.
John Lewis had become democracy's missionary for Americans. One man, one vote, equal opportunity, humanity. He changed America forever. And nothing symbolized that change better than that same bridge at Selma. Only this time, in 2000, the President of the United States marched proudly across to proclaim to the world that a few brave men, women, and children had indeed changed us forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Lewis.
Thank you very much. Marvin, thank you for those kind words of introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. I must tell you that I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be here. Thank you so much, my beloved brothers and sisters. I want to thank my colleague, my friend, my brother, your congressperson. You're more than lucky. You're very best, very, very blessed to have Emmanuel Cleaver as your congressperson. He is the best. To be here tonight in Kansas City, to be here as you salute and honor James B. Nutter for his leadership, his vision, and for his dedication. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for speaking up, for speaking out, for doing the right thing. To be here in the presence of Henry Block, my friend, my brother. You don't know this, you probably don't know this, but you and your family have supported me in some of my campaigns, and I want to say thank you. Thank you. Now, I know this was not supposed to be a political night, and I'm not going to say anything about politics. I leave that for Emmanuel and others. It is true that I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, as you saw on the film, outside of a place called Troy. Yes, my father had been a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. And it's true that in 1944, when I was only 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, that my father had saved $300, and with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. And my family still own that farm and own that land today. On this farm, we raised a lot of cotton, corn, peanuts, a lot of chickens, some cows. On the farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens. And I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chicken. I'm glad we didn't have chicken tonight, because it probably would have been a problem for me. I know most of you here in Kansas City, here in the heart of the Midwest, you don't know anything about raising chickens. Some of you can raise a little fuss, stir up a little trouble from time to time, but you don't know anything about raising chickens. You know about Popeyes or Kentucky Fried, but you don't know anything about raising chicken. As a little boy, let me tell you what I had to do. I had to take the fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Some of you may be saying, now, John Lewis, why do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest, and there would be some more eggs. And you have to be able to tell the fresher eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. Do you follow me? It's okay you don't follow me. It's all right. When these little chicks were hatched, I would fool these setting hens. I would take these little chicks away from the hen and put them in a box with a lantern, raise them on their own, or give them to another hen, but get some more fresh eggs and mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, encourage the setting hen to stay on the nest for another 3 weeks. That was not the right thing to do. It was not the moral thing to do. It was not the most loving thing to do, not the most nonviolent thing to do. It was not the most democratic thing to do. But the problem, I was never quite able to save $18.98 to order the most inexpensive incubator or hatcher from the Susan Roebuck store. Are any of you old enough to remember the Susan Roebuck catalog? Yeah, that big book, heavy book. Some people call it the Ordering book. Other people call it the Wish book. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. So I just kept on wishing. But as a young child, about 9 or 10 years old, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and my cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, like we gather here in this big room. And my brothers and sisters and cousins would line the outside, but around the chicken yard. And I would start speaking or preaching. And when I look back on it, some of these chickens would bow their heads. Some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced, Emmanuel, that some of those chickens that I preached to in the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of our colleagues listen to us today. As a matter of fact, some of those chickens was a little more productive. At least they produce eggs. Well, that's enough of that story. Growing up there outside of Troy, when we would visit the little town of Troy, visit Montgomery, visit Tuskegee, visit Birmingham, I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. And I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. I would visit the little town of Troy. And I remember as a young child, there was a little department store on the corner, Rosenberg Department Store, that my parents and others would go and shop. And I remember some of the whites in the little town of Troy in Pike County, Alabama, the way they would use the word Jew was almost like using the N word. So I grew up trying to avoid saying Jew because it was, for me, it was negative. The way I heard it repeated over and over again. And I always tried to say Jewish this or Jewish that. Asked my mother, asked my father, why? And they said, boy, that's the way it is. Don't get in trouble. Don't get in the way. But in 1955, 15 years old in the 10th grade, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on our radio, and the action of Rosa Parks, the leadership, and the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired me to find a way to get in the way. Growing up in church, I've heard over and over, and reading the scripture, I heard over and over people comparing the struggle of African American to members of the Jewish community. We would sing songs, go down Moses, way down in Egypt land, and tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. So I grew up as a child, as a student, as a participant in the movement, as being concerned about the plight of the Jewish community in America and around the world. As a student in school in Nashville at the age of 17, we started studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, studying the great religions of the world, studying what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa and what he accomplished in India, studying Thoreau in civil disobedience. Early on, I wrote a letter to Martin Luther King Jr. When I was 17. I didn't tell my mother, my father, any of my sisters or brothers, any of my teachers. I wrote a letter to him and told him I needed his help. He wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket. And I often think if it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., hadn't been for people teaching me the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, to stand up, to speak up, to speak out, to get in what I call trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. I don't know what would have happened to me. I felt called, moved by what I call the spirit of history, to become involved and not be silent. It was in the city of Nashville, Tennessee, 17 years old, when I met Rosa Parks. And as you saw in the video, in 1958, Dr. King invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. I met him. These two individuals changed my life, and I have not looked back. During the height of the civil rights movement, many members of the Jewish community stood with us, fought with us, marched with us, and some even died with us. We can never, ever forget the three young civil rights workers, Anna Goodman, and Micah Schwerner, and James Chaney, two young Jewish men from New York and a young African-American man from Mississippi. These three young men, riding in a car on the night of June 21st, 1964, went out to investigate the burning of an African-American church because many of the churches were used for voter registration workshops, meeting places. They were stopped by the sheriff, arrested, taken to jail, later released from jail, turned over to the Klan, where they were beaten, shot, and killed. I tell young people all across America that these three young men didn't die in Vietnam. They didn't die in the Middle East. They didn't die in Eastern Europe or Africa or Central or South America. They died right here in our own country, trying to help create a better society. There's a group of us in the Congress trying to get the Postal Service to issue a stamp in their name because they are the founding fathers of the new America. Next year will be 50 years that they left us. Blacks and Jews gave some blood together in Mississippi, in Alabama, and other parts of the Deep South. So, as people, we have an obligation, a mission, and a mandate to do whatever we can to bring down the walls of bitterness, the walls of separation, and we must say to the larger society, there cannot be any room in our society for bigotry, for anti-Semitism, for we all live in the same house, not just the American house, but the world house. Yes, we have come a distance in laying down the burden of race, but the scars and stains of racism, anti-Semitism, and bigotry still exist in America, in Europe, and other parts of this world, on this little planet, on this little spaceship we call Earth. And none of us, not one of us, can rest, be happy, or be at home, or at peace with ourselves till we end division and hatred towards someone because of their race, their color, nationality, because of their religion, or because of sexual orientation. One people, one family, one house. I tell you, during the height of the movement, I met a young man named Daniel Lyons. He's a great photographer. He was working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Cairo, Illinois. This is where the Ohio and the Mississippi River come together. It was like being in the Delta of Mississippi or in the Black Belt of Alabama. This young man was born in Forest Hills, New York, Jewish, met his parents, his mother, his father. He graduated from the University of Chicago. He came to Cairo and later to the South with a camera. He said, I'm a pretty good photographer. I want to help. I want to record what happened. He became a staff of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And some of the major images that you see all across America today were taken by this young Jewish man. We became brothers. We became friends. And many of the young Jewish students that marched, that worked in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Georgia, all across the South and all across America, we all became a circle of trust, a band of brothers and sisters. There are forces in America that want to take us back to another period. We have to say we've come too far. We made too much progress to turn back. We must continue to go forward as one people, as brothers and sisters. I want to thank you as members of JCRB and AJC for going to the South, going there, seeing what happened and how it happened. We all can learn, we all can grow and move forward. On March 7, 1965, I had all of my hair, a few pounds lighter, 25 years old, when I was asked, along with Jose Williams, of Dr. King's organization, to lead the attempted march from Selma to Montgomery. You notice I was wearing a backpack before it became fashionable to wear backpacks. I thought we were going to be arrested and we were going to go to jail, so in this backpack I had 2 books. I wanted to have something to read. I wanted to have something to eat. I had one apple and one orange. One apple and one orange wouldn't last that long. Since I thought we would be arrested and we would be in jail, I'd be in there with my friends and colleagues. I had toothpaste and toothbrush. I wanted to be able to brush my teeth. We get to the edge of the Epipettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River. Jose Williams said to me, "John, can you swim?" I said, "No, what about you?" He said, "A little." I said, "Well, there's too much water down there. We're not going to jump. We're going forward." And we continued to walk, men, women, and children. Came to the highest point on the Epipettus Bridge. Down below, we saw a sea of blue, Alabama State Troopers. We came within hearing distance of the state troopers, as you saw in the video. The major said this was an unlawful march. It would not be allowed to continue. You must return to your homes or to your church. And Jose Williams said, "Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray. And before we can pass word back, for people to kneel and pray." The major said, "Troopers, advance." And they did come toward us, beating us, tear gassing us, trampling us with horses. I thought I saw death. I thought I was going to die. But I believe somehow, in some way, the Almighty kept me here and spared me for a purpose. And that's why I feel so driven to get out and push and use the time to say we must create a beloved community, that we must redeem not only America, but we must redeem or help redeem our little planet. And we can do it. If in America we can emerge as a model, maybe the rest of the world will join us and create a truly multiracial democratic society. So tonight I'm saying to you, it doesn't matter whether we're black or Jewish. It doesn't matter whether we're Latino, or Asian American, or Native American. It doesn't matter whether we're straight or gay. We all are in the same boat, as April and Randolph would say from time to time. Just maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great country in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. I want to tell you a little story, because I know for some of you it's been a long day, a long night. When I was growing up outside of Troy, Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I had an aunt by the name of Seneva. And my Aunt Seneva lived on what we call a shotgun, in a shotgun house. She didn't have a green manicured lawn, had a simple plain dirt yard. I know here in Kansas City, here in the heart of the Midwest, you have never seen a shotgun house. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Every Friday, she would get out and cut branches from a dogwood tree and tie these branches together and make a broom. And she called that broom the breast broom. And she would sweep this dirt yard very clean because she wanted that dirt yard to look good on the weekend. For those of you who may not know what a shotgun house is, in a nonviolent sense, an old house, one way in, one way out, maybe a tin roof, where you can bounce a basketball through the front door and it will go straight out the back door. My Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. But one Saturday afternoon, a group of my brothers and sisters and first cousins, about 12 or 15 of us young children, were out playing in my Aunt Seneva dirt yard, and an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing, and the rain started beating on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. My aunt became terrified. She started crying. She thought the old house was going to blow away. She got all of us little children together and told us to hold hands. And when one corner of this old house appeared to be lifting from its foundation, she had us to walk to that side to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. When the other corner appeared to be lifting, she had us to walk to that corner. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never, ever left the house. I said to you tonight that the wind may blow, the thunder may roll, and lightning may flash, and the rain may beat on our old house. But people who believe in justice, who believe in freedom, who believe in democratic ideas, we cannot afford to stop now. We cannot afford to leave the house. So walk together, pray together, and fight the good fight together, and keep your eyes on the prize together. And we will tear down those walls and build one people, one nation. Thank you very much.
And now, please welcome to the stage Henry W. Block.
All I can say after listening to that is, wow, that was just really remarkable. I think we all learned something from that. We've been spoiled, I think, over the last few years, but what you've gone through is really remarkable. Thank you for being here. Good evening and welcome to you all. And I'm happy to be with you to salute the good work done by the Jewish Community Relations Bureau, American Jewish Committee, led by Board Chair David Rudman and Executive Director Marvin Sneller. The work you and your organization do improves the dignity of all mankind. It also is my honor to present tonight's award to James B. Nutter, Sr. Jim has been a friend of mine for a number of years, and he has been a friend to Kansas City. Kansas City, of course, knows him best as the founder of James B. Nutter and Company, a mortgage banking business. But I bet you did not know that Nutter and Company is one of the oldest mortgage firms in the United States, is one of the top 10 largest private firms in the U.S., and currently services $7 billion in mortgages in all 50 states. But Jim Nutter has been a friend to Kansas City for many other reasons. His own money and drive have improved our city's infrastructure, helped to repeal the blue laws so people could buy groceries on Sunday, and he has helped our city rebuild blighted neighborhoods, such as the Ivanhoe Firehouse and Nutterville. Nutterville, which you heard about earlier, is an area near 40th and Baltimore that Jim lovingly adopted, buying rundown homes, improving them, and turning them into efficient office space. And Jim has fought for equality as far back as 1964. Jim worked to help pass the ordinance that made it illegal for shopkeepers, hotels, and restaurants to refuse service to black patrons. And while Jim will tell you there is no more staunch Democrat alive than he is well respected by all politicians and civic leaders. In fact, he recently received the Chamber's prestigious Kansas Cityan of the Year. Jim Nutter has a heart as big as his laugh and has changed Kansas City for the better in ways large and small. It is a great honor to present the 2013 Humanitarian Award to one of our country's greatest gentlemen, James B. Nutter, Sr.
I wonder who put me after Congressman Lewis. But after all the nice things my friends said about me, it's perfectly all right. They could put me any place they want to. We are all blessed to be here tonight in this room, in this great country, and among such good people and such good friends. I feel especially fortunate and very, very honored to have chosen to receive this prestigious award named for a man for whom I have respected and admired, Henry W. Block. A kind, honest, generous man who leads by quiet example. A man who has done so many great things for this community. And I am doubly honored to be in the same room with one of my personal heroes, the Honorable John Lewis, one of the most courageous persons the civil rights movement ever produced. He had been a needed voice for fairness, reason, cooperation in the United States Congress for more than 25 years. Being in the mortgage business, I admire and appreciate the Congressman's strong stand against subprime lending practice and merciless foreclosures. Representing Lewis has helped make the American dream of home ownership a reality for the same generation. and has sponsored legislation to keep families in their homes during these hard economic times. It is wonderful and fitting that you are here, Mr. Lewis, because while you were leading the way in Selma and Montgomery, Kansas City Jewish community was helping to change the culture of this quietly segregated city. In 1964, we went door to door, Jews and Christians and blacks and whites and arm, to pass the nation's first. Kind of unbelievable that Kansas City would be the first public accommodation laws. We made it illegal. We made it legal for shops and hotels and restaurants in Kansas City to refuse service to black patrons. We endured insults and hard door slammings in our faces. But work together, we did it. Now, thank goodness, it's almost inconceivable that we had to actually pass a law for people to be treated like human beings. To be honored tonight in the name of Henry Block and the Jewish Community Relationships Bureau is humbling. I cannot thank you enough, but let me try. And please forgive my pronunciation. Toda and Shalom. Thank you, and peace be with you.
To offer our closing remarks, please welcome Jim Nutter, Jr.
Good evening. Congressman Lewis, thank you very much for your courage. And it is quite an honor for myself to meet you tonight. It's my privilege to be here tonight and offer congratulations to my dad on behalf of our family, our friends, and our associates at Nutter & Company. My father's commitment to fairness and equality and his compassion for those lives who are not so privileged has been an inspiration to me. And to everyone who has worked with him or for him over the years, so much progress has been made in my father's lifetime in terms of social justice. But Representative Lewis's presence here tonight reminds each of us that struggle is not over, that it is never over. That human nature and economics still leave many people, good people, marginalized,
no matter their color or their religion, or how long they've been among us. The goal of this dinner is not only to honor this year's Human Relations Award recipient, but also to inspire and motivate each one of us to stand up and to stand together for justice and equality for everyone. To inspire our community and to live our lives as my father has, in the spirit and mission of the Jewish Community Relations Bureau, American Jewish Committee. Your very presence here tonight puts you in the renewed fight against racism and bigotry, and enjoins you to a diverse coalition committed to achieving equal opportunity and justice for all Kansas Cityans. Your individual, personal strength and commitment makes us all stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 2013 JCRB AJC Human Relations Dinner. We look forward to seeing you next year. Safe travels and good night.